And we're going to get started. Thank you everyone so much for joining us for today's Skoll World Forum Ecosystem Day panel called Refugee Entrepreneurship, Global Opportunities, Local Solutions. This is an event that is wholly curated and hosted by 51 Labs, and we are really excited to have you all here today and to have an amazing panel of experts to talk about this issue and to talk about all of the exciting things that are happening around the world in this space right now. Before we begin, just a couple of quick logistical things. Many of you have heard me say this over the past couple of minutes, but this event will be interpreted, so please click at the bottom of the screen. You can choose your interpretation. Most of the event will be in English, so I would encourage you to click on English. Because one of our panelists will be translated from Arabic to English. That being said, we welcome questions in English, Arabic, and Kurdish because we can translate all of those. And we also have panelists that speak Spanish as well. And so feel free to ask in various languages if you want to. We want this event to be really participatory, and so please feel free to ask questions in the chat at any point during the panel. Add comments. We would love to hear your discussion. So, who are we? My name is Alice Bosley. I am the co-founder and executive director of 51 Labs, which is a startup incubator for diverse entrepreneurs, which includes entrepreneurs that have been displaced or affected by conflict. We've been operating since 2017 in the Kurdistan region of Iraq and have been supporting amazing Iraqi and Syrian entrepreneurs to launch scalable, innovative businesses across the country. This year, we're planning on expanding globally because this is a global issue, unfortunately. In mid-2021, the number of people that had been displaced globally was set at 84 million. Since then, as everyone here knows, there are over 4.3 million Ukrainians that have recently been displaced across their border, many millions more displaced within. And unfortunately, displacement seems like something that will continue into the future. The humanitarian system was designed decades ago in order to ensure that people are kept safe and sheltered once they have been displaced. This includes providing shelter, food, non-food items, healthcare. But once the emergency is over, what is next? The system was not built to really tackle that problem. But the average rate of displacement, according to the European Commission, is around 20 years for refugees. Sorry, the average length of displacement. And it's around 10 years for people who have been internally displaced. So this is not a short-term challenge. These are people who are often stuck in limbo for decades, for generations, and there need to be sustainable solutions. We at 51 Labs see entrepreneurship as a really exciting pathway towards rebuilding your life and livelihood with dignity. Often people who have been displaced face obstacles in accessing employment at their level because they potentially do not have the local network, they may not speak the local language, potentially their certifications don't translate to the new location. But entrepreneurship uses the skills and the talent that you have as an individual and allows you to, use that to create your own livelihood. So we're really lucky today because we have a panel of people that think similarly about displacement. And the panel is of experts from around the world who can give a variety of contexts and viewpoints to this issue. And so I am going to introduce the panelists now. Znara has been kicked off, but hopefully she will be able to come back on soon. It's probably because her electricity went out. So to start, we have Ana Reyes, who is a social entrepreneurship professional from Impulsa, Colombia. Ana Reyes is an urban development manager from Rosario University with a master's degree in public administration from the Central European University. She has 7 years of experience advising the Colombian government agencies, UN agencies, nonprofits, and local governments in social innovation, entrepreneurship, economic development, and urban development. She currently works with the Colombian government's entrepreneurship initiative, Impulsa. So Anna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Charlie Fraser, the co-founder and partnerships director of TERN. Charlie is the co-founder and partnerships director at TERN, which is an ambitious social enterprise and ever-growing community with a mission to enable refugees to thrive through the power of their own ideas. Since 2017, they have worked with more than 360 refugee entrepreneurs in the United Kingdom and are on a mission to launch 2,000 refugee-led businesses by 2025. Charlie has also worked as a trustee for the Refugee Employment Network and as an advisor to the Global Refugee Entrepreneurship Network and the Home Office's Refugee Entrepreneurship Pilot. Welcome, Charlie.
Great to be with you.
Thanks. Next, we have Oscar Pinheiro, head of sub-office Boa Vista, Brazil, who is currently on emergency deployment in Budapest, Hungary, responding to the Ukraine crisis. Oscar is a humanitarian professional with over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit and UN space. He's been working with the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, for the past 17 years in locations like South Sudan, Bangladesh, Iraq, and Ecuador. He is the head of UNHCR's sub-office in Boa Vista, Brazil, and is passionate about innovative approaches to humanitarian challenges. Welcome, Oscar.
Thank you. Very glad to be here and to meeting you all. Thank you.
Thanks. Finally, Znara is still not here, but hopefully she will come back as soon as her electricity comes back. So I will introduce her now anyway. Znara is the founder and CEO of Sev Gallery. She's an artist and entrepreneur from Syria who is on a mission to spread art throughout Kurdistan. Before coming to Iraq, Znara was a member of the faculty of the Art Institute of Damascus, where she focused on ceramics. Znara now lives in Erbil and founded Sev Gallery, an art center in training space, which also sells do-it-yourself art boxes. She's especially passionate about using art to support other women. She's also a painter and photographer and has been in a number of art shows. We are personally really excited because Znara was an entrepreneur in many of our entrepreneurship programs in Iraq. So when Znara comes back, we will be really pleased to welcome her. Okay, so now we are going to get started, less talking from me and much more talking from the panelists. So to start, we're going to start with Charlie because you're just the first person I see on my screen. Can you give a short summary of your organization and your organization's mission?
Absolutely, Alice. Happy to go first. So it's lovely to be here. I'm Charlie. I'm one of the co-founders of TERN, and we are a UK-based social enterprise, and we've been working on the topic of refugee entrepreneurship for the last 5 years. Working in the UK context presents particular challenges. We have a refugee population of about 135,000 refugees, so comparatively small to some of the other markets we'll be hearing from today. And a relatively well-developed civil society around that community. But what was really missing was a focus on livelihoods. So the UK traditionally has done quite well supporting refugees in emergency situations, but has really struggled when it comes to longer-term integrations. And that has had negative consequences on public perception and policy incentives. So really over the last decade, the UK has been going backwards on how, from a government level, we welcome and include refugees. So when TERN started, it was recognizing that actually we needed to be much more effective at recognizing the talents and potential of refugees to bring new ideas and experiences to economies. And we really wanted to do that by empowering their entrepreneurial talents to be at the forefront of how we build solutions for this community. And that's really what we've been doing for the last 5 years. And so while sadly we see the policy environment around refugees in the UK go backwards, we have seen systemic change about how we support refugee entrepreneurs in the UK. So TERN itself has grown and now has a community of about 270 founders across the country, but we also now have work in 5 other regions of the country, specifically focused on refugee entrepreneurs. And that's one of the main messages I hope comes out of the session today, is that if we want to really support this community in thriving economically and through their own ideas, we need to target them specifically with solutions that meet their needs and build their trust. And I'm pleased to say that in the UK, we are starting to see the momentum and recognition and what that looks like. And where we want to go next is hopefully having a larger platform to advocate for broader change that recognizes that if we want businesses to flourish, we need to remove some of the barriers for displaced people to access work and to access our societies more broadly. So it's lovely to be here and very much looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Charlie. It's awesome to have you. Next, just because this is the next person I see on the screen, Oscar, would you mind giving kind of a broad overview of your work with UNHCR and your organization's mission?
Thank you, Alison. Well, many of you know UNHCR. UNHCR is the mandated agency to work on the protection of refugees. So the first thing that we do is that we work with authorities to make sure people have access to protection, so have access to get to those countries. So we work a lot on documentation. We work a lot on having people be allowed, which is not always the case, and then have full rights within those countries. So experiences from before, like in Iraq or many other countries, usually refugees don't have access to work or a right to work. So that is a part of the work that we do to advocate to make sure that the refugees are able to have a full access, unimpeded access to all the rights like any other normal citizen. We focus a lot on that, on protection. Usually during emergencies, we do provide that humanitarian assistance. But as we look, as Alice pointed out, as we look at the trajectory of refugee crisis and the long periods that people stay, the more we need to look at integration. So what we're doing now at the moment, in particular in Brazil, is we are doing a lot of work on securing or having the information on data, having the profiles of refugees, the socioeconomic profiles of refugees, and then tailoring specific solutions and services for those refugees. We're partnering a lot with capacity building entities to be able to provide the skills needed for refugees to be able to be inserted in the workforce. But something that I've been working for a number of years now is that what Charlie pointed out, that particular group of entrepreneurs that need, as Charlie pointed out, the trust and the networks and the support for them to thrive. So I helped establish a couple of business incubators targeting those refugee entrepreneurs, and then continuing with that work to be able to provide that level of services and skill sets that are seldomly found in emergencies. And I think if we start from the very beginning of the emergency to look at those opportunities, we'll be able to have a better outcome for the refugees and for the host communities. And thank you again.
Thank you so much, Oscar. I think that is definitely true. We're going to go to our next panelist, Znara. Znara, I already gave a brief introduction of you when I think your electricity went out, but could you introduce yourself to the attendees and tell them a bit about Sub Gallery as well?
نعم، بداية شكرا على هذه الاستضافة الجميلة. أنا اسمي زنارة أحمد، مؤسسة سيف جاليري. طبعا سيف جاليري فينا نقول عنه مركز بيقدم مجموعة أنشطة فنية اللي هي الورشات وأيضا التدريبات. طبعا نحن بنستهدف الأطفال وأيضا الشباب عن طريق هاي الورشات. ما بعرف، هدفنا هو كيف ممكن ننمي المهارات المجتمعية ونعزز الاندماج بين مختلف شرائح الموجودة ضمن إقليم كردستان العراق عن طريق هاي الأنشطة الفنية. انطلق مشروع سيف جاليري من 2018 لما حضرت إحدى تدريبات 5-1 لاب اللي هو كان ريادة الأعمال، يعني كان ب 2018. بعدين أخذنا الخطوة الثانية، هو إنه نحن نعمل ريجستريشن ويكون اسمه سيف جاليري وينطلق على أرض الواقع. نعم.
Great. Thank you so much, Znara, and we'll ask you more about that very soon, actually. Anna, welcome to the panel, and thank you so much for being here. Would you like to give a short introduction of Impulsa and the work that you all do?
Thank you, Alice. I'm very happy to be here. So I work with Impulsa. Impulsa is the agency that promotes innovation and entrepreneurship in Colombia. It's actually quite recent. It was created 10 years ago, and it's part of the Ministry of Commerce, Industry, and Tourism. And in Impulsa, we have a division of social entrepreneurship in which we've been working with people that were former guerrilla members from FARC and demobilized. And now in the social entrepreneurship division, we're trying to see how we can actually improve their business ideas, try to get it to markets, create connections between other people that are doing similar or complementary things that they're doing. But we also work with indigenous people. We also work with displaced people. Like in Colombia, we used to have a lot of internal displaced people that were moving from rural areas to the cities due to the conflict, the internal conflict that we've been facing over the past 15 years. So it was the first time that Impulsa started working with this population only like 3 or 4 years ago. And now we recently started working with migrants as well. As you have all known, we in Colombia have received a lot of migrants from Venezuela, and we didn't have actually a program related to entrepreneurship for them. So we started working on this topic, and basically we are trying to see what are their business ideas that they have, in what stages they are, because we have received like different scopes of what they are actually doing right now and what they need, and then we design these interventions according to their needs. So that's basically Impulsa. We have like many different areas. We work with entrepreneurs who are growing really fast, and also we work with ones that are actually just like starting and having business ideas. And we work with different population. In the division where I work, we work with the most vulnerable ones from the country, which are the ones that are like internally displaced. We also work with indigenous people, and now with migrants and refugees, and also with Colombians that have moved to Venezuela, and now they have come back to the country and are like trying to create enterprises. So that's basically what we do in Impulsa.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's great. To everyone who's joining us here as an attendee, please feel free to add questions throughout the panel. And for panelists, there will be many times when I ask one panelist a specific question, but other panelists may want to add in or add comments. Please feel free. We would love for this to be kind of an open discussion as well. So to start, Znara, you launched a business, I think in 2017, and since then have expanded your offerings and your products. I would love to hear about why you decided to start a business in Iraq. Tell us the story of launching Sub Gallery and how it went. Znara, you're on mute.
بداية بحكم أنه أنا دارسة فنون تطبيقية وقسمي سيراميك، يعني أول شيء فكرت فيه لما جيت على البلد كيف ممكن أنا أشتغل باختصاصي يعني، وبعتقد هي رغبة كل حدا بيدرس وبيختص بمجاله يعني، بس أحياناً الحرب واللجوء بيغير السيستم شوي يعني، بس بعدين بيعمل رجوع يعني لذاته لاختصاصه. فالفكرة أنه أنا لما جيت لهون ما شفت هاي المراكز اللي ممكن أنا أزورها وأضل أتدرب على هاي المسألة يعني، أنه ضمن اختصاصي يعني. هون حسيت في شيء لازم أنا أعمله بحكم أنه هذا اختصاصي يعني، وبلشت أفكر بطريقة معينة كيف ممكن أنا أساهم أو أفتح أو أشتغل بمجال له علاقة بالفن. للأسف يعني كانت البداية إنه بلد جديد. الشغلة اللي كتير منيحة هي إنه أنا اللغة مشتركة، اللغة الكردية، فهذا كان كتير خفف يعني نوعاً ما خليني أقول اللجوء. ما تبقى كان في ثقافة جديدة لازم أنا أتعرف عليها. بلشت شوي يعني بهاي المسألة، حسيت في مشكلة عن جد بيعاني منها الكل حتى الأطفال والشباب، ما في هاي المراكز الفنية. أنا كموجودة هون وضمن اختصاصي حبيت أطرح فكرة سيف جاليري. طبعاً هي بداية كفكرة مشروع أنه أنت تحول فكرة إلى واقع وحقيقة، هاي لحالة أكبر تحدي، وإذا كنت أنت لاجئ يعني. فبلشت الفكرة من نفسي، يعني من إنه أنا أعمل سيرش أشوف شو هي البرامج اللي ممكن تدعم هيك أفكار. يعني كان موجود 5-1 لاب بتدريب بإحدى التدريبات تبع ريادة الأعمال. صار كان في شوية فوضى بالنسبة للأفكار، تم عن طريق التدريب، يعني ترتيب هي الأفكار بطريقة نوعا ما صحيحة. الشغلة اللي كتير كانت منيحة هو أثناء التدريب كان في نوعا ما الريفيوجيز مع الكوميونيتي المحلي يعني. فهذا الشيء ساهم أكثر بأنه وقتها أعرف فكرة أنه أنا لازم أعمل اندماج صحيح لحتى أنا أطرح بزنس بهي البلد يعني. فهذا الشيء نوعا ما ساعدني أكثر ضمن هذا البرنامج يعني. نعم.
Thank you, Znara. And also just shout out to Hassan, our translator. You are doing an awesome job. We really appreciate it. Simultaneous interpretation is the most challenging thing, and it's awesome to have a great translator. Okay, so we're going to move back to Oscar. Oscar, I would love you to give an overview of the displacement context in Brazil. What does that look like, and why do you feel like entrepreneurship is a potentially good solution to some of the challenges faced by refugees there?
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, I mean, not only in Brazil, I think in every country that I worked in, the entrepreneurs provide a solution. So I think many think that the focus should be on humanitarian assistance, and that's true. When you have very people fleeing conflict, humanitarian assistance is and preserving life is the most important thing. But you should also consider about the livelihoods and long-term integration perspective. So we should, in the continuum of kind of displacement, we should always look into that. And in Brazil, in particular, Venezuelans that are arriving are actually on average better educated than the Brazilians, and they bring another skill set. They have all the skills. They have all their education. They bring different kind of diversity to the mix. We work in the border with Venezuela. This is a poor region of Brazil. So actually, the arrival of Venezuelans has increased kind of the diversity of the businesses that are there and their capacity to innovate. Yeah, so I think it's important to invest in this. I think it's important to invest in entrepreneurs and ecosystems to be able to provide a long-term solution and an integration solution for refugees. So as they don't become dependent or on humanitarian assistance. Yeah. So when you're given the capacity to start their own business, there you have a huge potential to provide not only jobs, which is happening in Brazil, not only jobs for Venezuelans, but actually also for Brazilians. So this is what we see already in Brazil, that many Venezuelans are opening up small businesses, usually in the service sector. And because they have those prior skills, they're very competitive and able to also provide employment for local Brazilians. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question fully.
No, that was great, thanks. And we'll dive into some more things in a little bit. Charlie, you already talked about this a little bit in your intro, but can you kind of dive into the displacement context in the UK? And then again, entrepreneurship, business development versus employment or jobs. Why do you see that as a potential solution?
Yeah, so in the UK context, we have a community of 135,000 refugees. There is a lot of work going on at the moment from a policy perspective to change fundamentally the refugee policy environment in the UK. There's a very controversial bill currently going through government that would create two separate refugee statuses between those that come through resettlement programs and those that arrive through asylum, probably fundamentally setting back the asylum system in the UK as far back as it's been for the last 50 years. So it's a very controversial time in the UK, where there's a lot of debate about the rights of different refugee groups and how they arrive in the UK. Set against that context, we are really still nascent when it comes to developing refugee livelihoods support. We are not very strong when it comes to providing refugees with a fair opportunity to build a livelihood in this country, which is surprising considering the history of welcoming refugees in the UK and also the number of civil society organizations involved in the space. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, before TERN started, there was nothing. So we were bad at employment and we were nothing on entrepreneurship, which is a strange place to be. Why we think entrepreneurship is important to make sure self-employment is considered alongside employment is because we know that this is a very entrepreneurial community. We see that self-employment rates are about twice those of local population. We see as much as 1 in 5 working age refugees showing interest in self-employment versus employment. So if you are looking at refugee livelihoods, if you are considering how to support refugees into work and you're not looking at self-employment, for us, you're fundamentally missing a lot of the agency that this community is asking for. And so for me, and when we look at the UK ecosystem, what we're really pushing for is deepening of how we can support refugees into work and recognition that self-employment has to be a really fundamental part of that. And that's not just because that's what refugees aspire towards, but it's also because it gives the community agency to shape its own solutions. And that's something that employment doesn't have the same effect for. If we can really empower leaders from this community to create their own solutions, then what we do is empower them to really create their own social mobility. And we know that that is super important because in the UK, it doesn't really matter what class or what professional background you were before you left your home country. The likelihood is that you will end up in relative poverty. Well over 80% of the refugees we work with are living in relative poverty. And self-employment to us is the most powerful way that you can help change the circumstances of a refugee's livelihood, but also their wider community as well.
Thank you, Charlie. Those are some shocking statistics that you just shared and really hard hitting, so I appreciate that. So we have kind of 4 different contexts here, and we're going to go back to the Colombia context, which I think is such an interesting one because Colombia, you know, in Latin America, I think over the past number of years has really just shown this incredible entrepreneurial landscape. I mean, there's just so much happening. You're leading the region in so many sectors. And yet it does seem like there are people that are kind of getting left behind in this explosion of growth and innovation. And so, Anna, you're sitting at this really interesting point because you're in the government agency that oversees kind of entrepreneurship across the country. How do kind of more vulnerable segments of the community fit into the broader vision that the Colombian government has for developing entrepreneurship and innovation across the country? And then I'm going to add into this question something that someone just mentioned in the chat, which is, do you think that it's necessary to support refugee or migrant entrepreneurs separately from supporting local entrepreneurs? Is there, you know, a reason why that population potentially needs, I don't know, additional or different support? So I would love to hear your thoughts on that from the Colombia context.
Thank you, Alice. I would start with the second question. So I think, yes, we need to provide kind of like a different assistance in the sense that we are just recently started, and this is one of the main highlights of the government. We started providing to every single migrant that came to Colombia the year before last year, and that has been staying here for a while, a permit, like a residence permit that will allow them to stay in the country and work and have access to social security and so on for the next 10 years. So we are just like starting to fill in this gap. And in that sense, we still have many challenges because migrants cannot, if they don't have that permit, they cannot, for example, open a bank account, and they cannot create an enterprise in the Chamber of Commerce. So they still face a lot of challenges and barriers to access to credit, to access to, you know, like partners and allies. So I believe we still need to try to put like more attention on them. However, right now in Impulsa, we have a program, it's a pilot program that it's Hola Colombia Impacta. I'll share the website here. And in this program, what we were trying to do is we were trying to call to entrepreneurs who could be migrants, but they could also be Colombian citizens who were seeing migration as an opportunity for economic and social growth and inclusion. And then in their business models, they could apply and receive our funding. We were giving more or less $10,000 to each entrepreneur to develop and test and prototype their business ideas. But it was not exclusive for migrants. We were trying to see if Colombians were also seeing migration as an opportunity to develop enterprises and to see how they could, through their business models, integrate this population on income generation, which is one of the main challenges we are facing right now with this population, because actually they come to Colombia and we have seen with statistics that they have higher education levels than the average Colombians. But they face some difficulties because they cannot work in the same fields they were working before, because they need to try to see how what they studied in Venezuela is being like homologized in Colombia and so on. So it takes some time. So yes, we're trying to, with a lot of all different agencies from the national government, see how we can join efforts. As Oscar was saying, we have already gone through like this humanitarian assistance in which we were providing them access to vaccines, education, health. But now what we're trying to do is seeing more on the long term, like for the next 20 years and so on, what would this population will be doing here. And actually, this is one of the fields that they're more interested on. They also have like higher bilingualism levels. They speak English. So it would be like a shame if we are not actually seeing this as something that can not only bring diversity to Colombia, but also can actually increase and improve the quality of the jobs, the innovation that we're having, and so on. And from this first question, I don't know if you can repeat it again, sorry.
The first question was basically, how does this work that you're doing with more vulnerable and migrant communities fit into this broader goal that Colombia has of really like developing this vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem that you already have in your country?
Yeah, so as I was saying before, in Impulsa, we work, and actually we're working right now, and there was a recent report in which was saying that Colombia is one of the countries in which it's easier to be an entrepreneur, comparing with other countries in Latin America. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, but we're trying to see as well how we get into all the different regions that we have. Colombia, it's a very complex country in its geography, not only because of all the different countries, conflicts we already faced before, but also in its geography. Each region has some particular things, and what we're trying to do is trying to understand the population that comes from these particular places, what they can bring up to the table, what are like their needs, and we're trying to connect them with other different agencies, but as well trying to see how we can create value from what they already do, how they can be different from people that are doing similar things that they do. And we're just like recently started working with this population. It's not been too much time, so we're still learning, trying to see if we can actually make sure and have like a social impact to see if what we're doing is actually creating change and reducing inequality. But so far, the numbers that we have been telling us that we should continue. And actually, we started last year with this pilot, which was only with 10 enterprises that were working on migration. And now we're going to have, for the next 3 years, we're going to work with 1,300. So the challenge is growing. And I think it's because we're doing a good job.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there are a lot of opportunities and many things to work through. And you mentioned a couple of things that are challenges specific to newcomers or migrants to the country. And so, Znara, I wanted to go to you. As someone who came from outside of Iraq and decided to launch a business inside the Kurdistan region, what challenges did you face that you feel like were, particular to the fact that you were not a Kurdish Iraqi national?
Sorry. في الحقيقة حسن، أنا ذكرت كثير من المواضيع المشتركة اللي ممكن أنا أحكي فيها هلا، بحكم إنه ما بعرف اللاجئين بيفهموا على بعض أو بيمروا بنفس الظروف يعني. فإحدى التحديات هي طبعا آخر شيء أنا انتبهت لها اللي هي فكرة الاندماج، إنه أنا ما لقيت ولا برنامج بيخليني اندمج من خلاله مع المجتمع يعني. كان البحث ذاتي، يعني أنا أعمل اندماج أو أنا أدرك أو أنا أبحث يعني شو يعني فكرة الاندماج شو هي. تمام. هي كانت إحدى التحديات. التحدي الثاني هو كيف ممكن أنا أسجل عملي. في الحقيقة إذا ما كان عندك اندماج جيد، أنت معناته أنت يعني ما فيك تروح للمكان الصح لحتى تسأل إنه كيف بدي أسجل هذا العمل يعني. يا بدك تختار محامي نوعا ما المقابل رح يكون مبلغ عالي أنا ما بقدر عليه، أو أي حدا يمكن ما يقدر عليه، أو بده بيشتغل بشكل فردي ويفكر بالاندماج يعني. تمام. فهي كانت إحدى التحديات الموجودة. التحدي الثالث هي فكرة الآرت، النشاطات الفنية. بشوف إنه بشكل عام أي جهة هي ما بتعتبر إنه الآرت هو نوعا ما، خليني أقول فيه يكون ستارت أب يعني، فيه يكون يقدم خدمات أو يساهم نوعا ما باقتصاد معين يعني. هي كمان كانت إحدى التحديات لبين ما أنا التقيت يعني بتدريبات مع 51 لاب تم تغيير هي الفكرة نوعا ما يعني. بس أنا بشوف بشكل عام لا زالت إحدى التحديات هو إنه المجال الفني ما عم يعني ما عم ياخذ حقه بالنسبة للتدريبات أو للاهتمام بشكل عام من قبل الداعمين لهذا الموضوع. تحديات كثيرة يعني، ما بعرف قد ايه فيني احكي عنها، بس بالمجمل انه انت تكون بمكان امن وتقدر تروح فيه وتقدر تحس فيه بالامان، هو بيخليك عن جد انه انت تبحث لحتى تعمل اندماج صحيح يعني. يعني انا لهلا بحس انه في نقص بمساله البرامج اللي بتركز على الاندماج. انا اذا بعمل اندماج جيد عن طريق مشروع معين، أنا معناته بكسب ناس كثيرة لحتى يشتغلوا ويساهموا بتطوير واقتصاد هذا البلد يعني. اليوم برنامجنا اللي عم نقدمه عن بسيف جاليري عن طريق الأنشطة الفنية، عم نشوف كثير من مختلف الجنسيات عم يقعدوا على طاولة واحدة، عم بيصير في تبادل ثقافي، في تبادل بالافكار. هذا الشيء عم بيعزز يعني. هذا الشيء لو انا ما مريت فيه كشخص انا ما كنت رح افكر فيه، بس انا لهلا عم شوف انه هي مساله هي بحاجه لانه نحن نهتم فيها اكثر، لانه بعتقد من حق اي شخص انه هو يعيش نوعا ما بالشكل الصحيح. في كثير ناس ونساء مثلي، انا بحكي تجربتي، بس في كثير نساء مثلي انا موجودين بهي البلد، هن لاجئين عندهم قدرات وعندهم مهارات، بس للاسف ما بيتم تسليط الضوء عليهم عبر برامج معينه يعني. نعم.
Yeah, thank you so much, Znara, for giving your personal opinion. I know in Iraq it is challenging for people who don't have an Iraqi ID or residency to register businesses or to access employment. So I know that there are so many challenges there. Oscar and Charlie, I think that this is a really relevant question, and so I want to pass it to you all as well. The question that Juliana asked in the chat. Oscar, you have been working in your career supporting specifically people who have been displaced, but I think one of the major things that UNHCR does try to do is local integration and making sure that refugees are accepted into the host community, whether that's not only economically but also economically. So what do you think? Do you think that there need to be kind of separate programs specifically for people who have been displaced into a country?
Yes, well, so when we did a business incubator at the beginning in Ecuador, for instance, we focused primarily on refugees. And this creates tensions also the host community, especially if the host community is poor, like the refugees. So the second year of the business incubator, we incorporated also host communities and we noticed some differences. So as the colleague mentioned, there are some particularities, for instance, access to documentation, access to legal services, access to language skills, access to cultural sensitivity programs that are unique. You will not need those for a local entrepreneur. So what we design is like so this is a business incubator. So we did a selection of entrepreneurs, but we did a pre kind of session with refugees to be able to insert themselves quicker. Yeah. So that was quite good. Then all the other skills that you need, both for the host community and for the refugees, are the same. So networking, knowing your market, all the kind of basic that all of the packages are the same. It's just about that component. What we didn't know, and this happened the third year only, and then we incorporated that design as well, is the gender dynamics. So what happened is that we focused quite a bit on refugee women, and then refugee women started to have their own business and their own income. And then, the issues, we had conflicts within the homes, right? Because they would demand the husband to look after the children, when they went to classes or when they had to do events. And that created conflict, and that created even violence, domestic violence, gender-based violence. So then we incorporated another component, which is, the kind of the social aspects and conflict resolution models based on from a gender perspective for entrepreneur, especially women entrepreneur. So just to answer your question again, I think you have some particularities, especially issues documentation, accessing, as Anna pointed out, ways to run your business within the localities that are unique to refugees and not to the host community. But afterwards, the main kind of entrepreneurs is the same. I worked a little bit on local integration, and we're trying to create a local integration index. So how do you determine whether or not that person's fully integrated or not? And a lot of the things that entrepreneurs, the skill set entrepreneurs have, which is the networking and knowing the community, knowing who your target is, are incredibly important as social capital. And that social capital, you need, all the refugees need that social capital to be able to integrate it and succeed. And refugee entrepreneurs, you need it even more, because they need to really use that skill set to be able to sell their business. Yeah. Back to you.
Great, thank you so much. Charlie, do you have thoughts on this topic as well?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most fundamental questions that we get asked, which is, why do we target the refugee entrepreneur community specifically in comparison to migrant groups, and obviously then local populations as well? And for us, it's probably the most important thing that we have to recognize when looking to work with refugee entrepreneurs and support this community. And that's borne out by the fact that actually at the moment, our entrepreneurial ecosystems are really failing to include refugees, even more dramatically than any other population. And what I mean by that is, in the 500+ applications we've now seen to TERN, 70% of those people have started or managed businesses outside of the UK, but less than 5% are accessing any form of business support in the UK. So there's a huge gap between the business potential of this community and how much they are using mainstream business support systems in new countries. And so for us, that is a really compelling reason that if we want to start accessing and leveling the playing field for that level of business talent, we have to reach out to those communities directly and speak to them directly. Because just saying that your service is inclusive of refugees, saying that you work with refugee founders, is not the same as reaching those founders and supporting them in starting businesses. And that is one of the most important points. The second thing in this area is, it's important for us, I think, if you're going to do that well, to speak to refugees specifically as opposed to other migrant groups. And this is not universal across the sector, but from our perspective as TERN, we really recognize that refugees face a unique set of barriers that are different and disparate to other migrant categories. and often put them at even greater disadvantage. Migrant groups for sure face a whole range of barriers arriving in new countries, but it's exaggerated for refugees. And we have a lot of evidence in the UK that shows that if you take someone from the same gender, from the same professional background, from the same country, and they arrive in the UK, one via a work visa and one via a refugee visa, the refugee is much more likely to be unemployed. And if they do find work, be paid less than the migrant. And that speaks to this wider systemic disadvantage that we see for refugees versus migrants and versus local populations. So if we're going to cross that bridge, we think that we need services that recognize the differences between those groups, that speak specifically to refugees, and invest years into building trust with this population. One of the challenges that we see is that too often social impact organizations or programs come in and say, we're going to fund a program for 2 years around entrepreneurship for refugees as part of the wider funding cycles of integration for refugee populations. And then after 2 years, the priorities change, you move on elsewhere. This is not a topic you can do that for. Business success is built over 3 to 5 years. And if you want to be able to build trust with refugee entrepreneurs, we need funding cycles and funders and programs and organizations that buy into this at a systems level for 5 years plus as a minimum, so that we can close that bridge between the business talent of this community and the business ecosystems in our host countries.
Charlie, you brought up a number of really interesting things, and I just want to circle back on one thing, because you talked about how across the board, even though there are resources that are potentially available and potentially inclusive of refugees, they're not being accessed by refugees. What are those barriers that are stopping refugees from accessing these other resources that exist that are maybe not doing what you're doing and reaching out into the communities to ensure inclusion?
Yeah, it's something that we see quite a lot of, which is people saying, well, we're running a business workshops, so we'll share it with refugee NGOs and that will be enough. That will be how we make it inclusive of refugee communities. And that's not enough. You have to really effectively look to identify community champions within the very diverse community that is the refugee population. In the UK, we have over 55 nationalities represented from a whole range of different sectors. We have over 20 sectors in our community. If you don't recognize that diversity and spend time in investing and understanding the different groups that make up the refugee population, then it's very unlikely that you're going to get a diverse representation of that community coming to you to access your support. And that's what I mean about it being multi-year. It cannot be a one-off intervention. It cannot be a one-off outreach process. It has to be multi-year, where you continue to speak to the community, continue to recognize and represent their voices, and say, we are designing services for you. So everything we do at TERN is focused on working with our community to design new services that specifically meet their needs, not just saying that we have a pre-existing service that we think you can make the most of. It's completely the other way around. And I think that's essential, not just in terms of how we make our programs effective, but also how we make them accessible in the first place.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And going back to talking about designing programs with communities, Znara, there was a question specifically for you from Suad from Sama for All in the Q&A. She's asking basically, what sort of support did you receive to launch your business, either from nonprofits, private sector, and the government sector? And are you able today to earn money from your business? You are on mute, just so you know.
شكرا سعاد على السؤال الجميل. طبعا ما بعرف، أنا فكرتي كشخص دائما إذا بدنا نحقق الاستدامة بأي عمل لازم نفكر كيف نعمل مصاري، مش ناخذ دعم. يعني بالبداية يعني أكيد أنا حضرت تدريبات يعني مع 51 Labs، كان في بس منحة صغيرة من IOM بتذكر، يمكن وقتها كان $1000 يعني. فأنا لازم أصرف هاي المصاري بطريقة نوعا ما تكون صحيحة. يعني اشتريت شوية أدوات يعني، وبلشت من عندي يعني من أطفالي اللي كنت درسهم، يعني الأطفال اللي عندي بشكل خاص يعني. بعدين هلأ صار عندي في جاليري مفتوح، بيجي أكيد ناس، عنا أطفال بيجوا الصبح والمساء، بيجوا شباب من مختلف الجنسيات من المجتمع المحلي، من الضيوف الموجودين سواء refugees أو IDPs، من الأجانب الموجودين من مختلف الجنسيات بيجوا. أكيد في عنا ريجستريشن، في عنا نظام معين، في عنا بروجرام بالنهاية. يعني يعني لهلا نحن عنا ورشات، نحن بناخذ شغل، أحيانا بيكون في عنا عقود عمل مع بعض الجهات اللي هي نوعا ما بتهتم بالثقافة، مثل المعهد الألماني جوتي بإقليم كردستان. في كتير شغل نحن بنعمله بيجمعنا يعني شغل مع بعض. أي جهة أو أي طرف هو داعم لمسألة الفن أو لمسألة تنمية المهارات المجتمعية أو تعزيز فكرة الاندماج من ناحية أنه كيف نحن ندمج يعني نعزز فكرة الاندماج عن طريق الأنشطة الفنية، أكيد مرحب فيهم. يعني نحن ما فتحنا الجاليري هيك عن هيك، يعني بمجرد فكرة، لا، كان في عنا خطة كيف بدنا ندرس السوق بطريقة منيحة، كيف بدنا نطور العمل تبعنا. في عنا خطة مستقبلية أكيد كيف نحن نعمل وارد أكثر لهذا المكان، لحتى نحن نصير نوعا ما داعمين للمجتمع المحلي، أو نصير جزء ثقافي من المجتمع المحلي، ونقدر فيه من خلاله ندعم سواء الفنانين المحليين أو الريفيوجيز أو الاي دي بيز. نعم.
Thank you so much. And Znara, I don't know if you saw her comment, but Suad said thank you and bravo and good luck with hand claps. So now I'm going to move back to Oscar. Oscar, you work at UNHCR, the Global Refugee Agency, and the UN in general focuses on emergency situations. UNHCR in general focuses on emergency situations, though, of course, these emergency situations do end up protracted. How have you felt like UNHCR has potentially shifted the way it views emergency situations, how it views timelines, now that I think people like you are bringing in this idea of entrepreneurship, business development, livelihoods, and innovation into the conversation? Do you think UNHCR is still kind of viewing things on a year-by-year or even shorter timeline, or are there kind of broader strategic conversations happening?
Thanks, Alice. You put me in a difficult position, because if I don't give you the right answer, then I might get in trouble with my organization. So
you are live on Facebook. Watch out.
Hi, boss. So I think Charlie pointed to some of the same type of struggles that we have. That we're very much donor-driven. So right now I'm here in Budapest, and we're rolling out humanitarian assistance to the refugees coming from the Ukraine, and a lot of the focus will be on humanitarian assistance. So that will be the priority, but seldomly we look at what is the refugees' journey and how long they will be here, and what do they actually need to fully integrate. I think because I do a lot of emergency work as well, but sometimes I bring additional elements of what they will need in order to provide long-term sustainability and be able to contribute. It's strange because I'm here in Budapest, which is the birthplace of George Soros, so one of the most famous refugees that arrived in the US with, a few cents in his pocket and was able to make a huge financial empire. Or all the refugees bring an incredible kind of level of innovation and abilities. So this is what we need to provide. Now, humanitarian assistance is a very crude and very, at times, and I hope people don't get offended, but dehumanizing kind of support, meaning that this is the assistance that you get. You get water, you get shelter, and we're not able to go beyond that. And I think this forum, and the opportunity to work with organizations such as 51 Labs allows us to advocate that there needs to be a special consideration for this at the beginning of the emergency. So the Ukrainians are not, they come with skills. The refugees, they come with specific talents. How quickly are we able to identify those talents in order to promote them and be a contributive factor to the solutions, even the conflict in those countries, or the integration, you know, in the receiving country. So when I worked in Ecuador, we had Colombian refugees, and they were very dynamic, and they will be able to provide businesses, you know, to the Ecuadorian localities where they were very poor, and bring a level of understanding and innovation that it was very, very important for that local economy. So, you know, what we need to understand is the refugee socioeconomic profiles, and those are not easily obtained at the beginning of the emergency. So we take a long time to provide those profiles and establishing those networks. So now I'm working with social media and the private sector to actually do snapshots, you know, of those profiles. So, you know, very quickly do surveys and able to segment, you know, have a segmentation of those profiles, and then specifically target with services to those skills. Now, entrepreneurs in general society, we're talking about, you know, 5% of the population that are truly entrepreneur. Refugees are disproportionately within the entrepreneurial scale, because they actually are forced to be entrepreneurs because they don't get jobs, and we make the mistake sometimes of supporting businesses that we know are not good. So, you know, you have the people that sell street food, people that are doing hairdressing, nails, and these type of things, and we know that there's no market for it. So we need to be respectful first of the talents and the skills of the refugee entrepreneurs, and we need to be skilled and professional about the possibilities within that particular market. So, you know, you need to have this balance and be able to connect. I mean, and that what Skoll is doing today and what 5.1 does is, you know, to open those possibilities, having this platform for those two kind of needs to meet. And I think, you know, part of the work that we need to do and UniTERN needs to do is to advocate for this also to be part of your standard response, humanitarian response, meaning do we really have the right socioeconomic profiles at the start, and are we able to also deliver right away the kind of support that they will need to thrive in the hosting countries and hosting communities. Thank you. Sorry for the long response.
No, that was great. Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing the examples from different places. I feel like that's really interesting. It's also very stark, your comment about Budapest being the home of George Soros, and I think that was really great to bring up. You mentioned kind of the type of support and how you what you provide to entrepreneurs, and there was a great question in the Q&A that I want to we just got a bombed in a friendly way. There's a question in the Q&A that I wanted to bring up and share with Anna, but I think also this is something that everyone on this panel, including Znara, can probably speak to, which is there are challenges that refugee entrepreneurs face in accessing capital. So he brings up, Bahati brings up his own experience in Uganda as a refugee. He was not allowed to own property, which are used as security to acquire bank loans. This is the same in Iraq as well. This means it's impossible for refugee entrepreneurs to access financing. So Anna, could you speak about, first of all, do you see this as a challenge in different places? What is the Colombian government doing to look at this challenge? Because of course, access to finance is a challenge for all entrepreneurs, but especially refugees. And then there's a second question, which again, I'll put to the whole panel. Anna, if you have specific comments on this, how easy or difficult is it to find investors that are willing to invest in refugee entrepreneurs beyond the official bank channels, but when it comes to VCs or individual investors? So I would love your thoughts, Anna, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the panel to answer this as well.
Thank you, Alice. Yeah, definitely, this is a challenge for us as well. And as I was mentioning before, what we're trying to do right now is, like, since we have this residence permit that we started implementing last year. We are at the same time advocating with banks through the presidential agency, and what we're trying to do is to try to see how can we actually enhance the conditions that they are asking for migrants and Colombian returnees to be able to access to finance. So we believe that once we get into this residence permit and we have like a big amount of people that have already have a legal status in Colombia, and they have stayed here for even like more than 5 years. And when we do all the studies, we have also seen that these people are people that want to stay here. They're not coming just because of the situation in Venezuela, but also like they already feel part of the Colombian community. We have a very similar culture. So we're trying to advocate with different stakeholders to try to see how we can actually remove all these barriers for them to be able to access to credit and financial services. One of the easiest ways we thought about it was with this residence permit that the government has started working on. And now, like, actually, we believe that about 2 million people will be able to have this residence permit, which will allow them also on like, it will take some time, but it will be the first step to allow them to access to financial services. We are working together. You know, we have in Colombia, we have many different agencies from the international sector, UN agencies, local governments. And I think one of the things that actually the pandemic allowed is now that we have one like round table on migration and entrepreneurship, in which we are trying to see how we can all like join efforts and be aligned to do things together, because we were all doing like different scattered efforts from the international development funding, UN agencies, USAID, and now we're trying to see how we can have like 1 or 2, 3 goals, maybe like a very small scope, but trying to have like a bigger impact if we're working together. So that's what we're doing on the one hand. On the other one, we are designing programs, as I was mentioning, the one we had before, but we're going to have more in the next 3 years, in which we're going to give to these entrepreneurs not only the opportunity to grow in terms of what they need on their entrepreneurs, for example, if they need access to markets, or if they need to improve their marketing systems, or if they need to see how their sales are going, how are their costs being projected. We are also giving them capital according to their needs. We're not actually giving the money by itself. So what we're trying to see is we're trying to understand what they need, and then we have a budget for that, and we're giving them this money to each entrepreneur to see if that can actually helps them grow. So I think we do have like some efforts. We're trying to go through both scenarios. One, designing programs in which we give them access to financial services, but on the other hand, we're trying to see how we can improve the whole situation to make it easier and affordable, and trying to see also how we can reduce the steps. Sometimes they have to do a lot of things, and it can turn out to be very bureaucratic. So we're trying to see it from the perspective that you're moving to a new country, or just you don't know people, as Oscar was saying, your social capital can be very low. So how, even though you don't know these people, you don't know the place where you're living, how you can still access to this in an easy manner.
Thank you, Anna, and I really appreciate that the Colombian government is thinking through these issues, because I know how many challenges there are. For the other panelists, there are now a number of questions in both the Q&A and the chat, and so I want to give the 3 of you an opportunity to answer this finance question if you want to, or we can move on to other questions.
Alice, I can comment on this because it's actually similar to my answer for Celine's question as well, around what do we need the most? Because when we started TERN, we actually started TERN as a fund idea. So we were actually specifically looking to solve this question around how can refugee entrepreneurs access capital. And what we realized when we were trying to build that fund was there was really no information around the pipeline of talent coming from the refugee community, refugee business community. So there was really nothing we could evidence to show why lenders and investors would want to put money into this community. So we decided to change our idea and build the pipeline. And 5 years on, that pipeline is now sustainable, scaled, and we have a lot more information about why you should invest and lend to this community, which means that the lack of capital and credit in that community is now becoming, again, probably one of the most urgent challenges that we face. So I would say that the biggest limiter now for the entrepreneurs that we work with is being able to get them access to inclusive finance. And one of the misnomers that we have in the refugee space is that a lot of that needs to be investment capital, where actually for us, debt has a huge role to play. All of the most successful inclusive finance ecosystems we see globally with refugees have really proactive debt options that can meet the needs of refugee entrepreneurs. And again, going back to our earlier answer, our perspective at the moment is that we need funders that specifically lend and invest in refugee entrepreneurs. And Celine obviously knows this from the Refugee Investment Network very well. So from our perspective, it's less a case of trying to convince lenders and investors to put money into refugee entrepreneurs, more trying to convince them to have separate funding specifically for refugee entrepreneurs. And that is presents a whole range of challenges as well, but that's the conversation we are looking to have. Just to say, we are ourselves funded as an organization, support organization, primarily through corporate partners and public sector contracts. So we do a lot of our own capital fundraising through corporate sponsorship. And just to reframe that question around the challenges faced by refugees to access capital into the biggest thing that we need at the moment, we really are looking to solve that problem in the next 12 months. So we are going to do that in two ways. We are launching a microcredit fund in the UK specifically for refugee entrepreneurs called Skylight, which will be independent to TERN, but looking at making £1,000 zero interest loans available for refugees within 3 weeks of application. So getting the money into these businesses really fast, because we see that traditional loan applications take way too long if you're trying to build an idea and have no money. And then in the midterm, and Celine, I will be coming to the RIN team about this as well, we're potentially exploring how we could build a more inclusive venture fund for refugee businesses as well in the UK context specifically. So though that is probably the biggest thing that we need, is funders who are willing to take that conversation seriously.
Thank you, Charlie. And to the audience, you now know what you need to do, which is fund Charlie's fund.
You can also fund me. I'd say that as well. Yeah.
As a person or as an organization?
I can't answer that question. That's
nice.
أنا فيني أحكي بس نقطة.
Yeah, Znara, would you like to go?
Yes, Alice. هلا بصراحة أنا كحدا لاجئ ما بشوف في برامج كتيرة هي مخصصة لدعم اللاجئين، يعني هاي النقطة يعني. وأيضا يعني الجهات الموجودة أحيانا في سوء فهم أو عدم فهم لاحتياجات اللاجئين، بما معناه نحن اليوم يمكن أوسكار ذكر كتير قصص هو وأنا وبقية الزملاء. أنا حابة أكد على هذا الموضوع إنه اليوم فينا نصنف في حدا لاجئ هو بيحتاج احتياجاته الأساسية تتلبى، في حدا لاجئ بيحتاج إنه هو يتلقى دعم لحتى يقدر يندمج ويشتغل، في حدا ثالث هو بده يقدم خدمات ليقدر يشغل أكبر عدد من اللاجئين في هذا العمل. أحياناً يعني طريقة طرح الدعم عم بتكون بطريقة خاطئة، عدم فهم احتياجات الثلاثة ما عم تخلي نقطة تواصل بين الطرفين، يعني كتير عم بيصير في خطأ بهذا الموضوع. فالشيء اللي أنا بدي أرجع أكد عليه إنه يا ريت يكون في برامج أكثر للاجئين. أنا اليوم أكيد مو أنا لحالي موجودة، في مئات من النساء يعني هن موجودين وعندهم مهارات، فنانين ومهندسين وأطباء وأيادي عاملة، بس هن للأسف ما عم بيلاقوا هذا الدعم، سواء كان عن طريق تدريبات أو عن طريق الدعم المادي اللي ممكن أي ستارت أب هو بيحتاجه بمراحل ممكن تكون بالسنة الثانية أكثر. يعني المتابعة، كيف ممكن تكون المتابعة لهي المشاريع اللي عم تنطلق، سواء لاجئين أو نازحين أو من المجتمع المحلي. فبالحقيقة أنا عم شوف يعني من وجهة نظري إنه أحياناً في برامج هي نوعاً ما عم تروح للعمق لتشوف شو هو الاحتياجات لحتى تلبي بطريقة صحيحة. نعم.
Znara, your answer goes in line with two other questions that we got. One question you partially answered, but there was another part of it, which is, who do you think has better chances of success in their business, camp refugees or out-of-camp refugees? And then another question was asked, which is basically what, and I will switch it a bit for you, but what sort of follow-up is necessary to make sure that you can succeed over the long run?
هلا انا بصراحه يعني انا ممكن احكي عن تجربتي الشخصيه. انا اليوم انا بعيش حاله الناس الاخرين هن تجاربهم غير، فانا ما بقدر اقيم الموضوع شو هو الانسب للاجئين بشكل عام. بس انا من مفهومي يعني انا كشخص اليوم انا فنانه يعني بشتغل، انا عندي مفهوم الحركه كثير مهم، بما معنى انه كل ما انا بتحرك كل ما بكتسب خبره جديده، كل ما بكتسب صور جديده، كل ما بلتقي بناس بيصير عندي نتوركينج اكثر. فهي مسائل جدا جدا مهمه. بس اليوم هي من وجهه نظري، بس انا اليوم قيم الموضوع هل هو داخل الكامب يعني له فرصه اكثر او برا. ممكن يكون في حدا من ضمن المخيم عنده مهارات خارقه ويجي يعمل مشروع جدا يكون ناجح. انا ما بستقل بصراحه بالناس اللي عايشه بالمخيمات، لانه انا بعرف عن قرب يعني قد ايه كميه الناس اللي الرائعه من ناحيه الامكانيات، بس للاسف ما في تسليط ضوء على هي الامكانيات. بتمنى انه يكون في جهود فرديه منهم نفسهم انه هن يقدروا يتحركوا يعني. بس من وجهه نظري الحركه كثير مهمه. نحن يكون في عندنا برامج نحن نقدر هن يحضروا البرامج ويرجعوا للمخيم، كثير كثير مهمه. نحن بالنهايه عم نفتح طرقات جديده، عم ابواب جديده. نحن ما دام عم نحكي عن فكره الاندماج فلازم هو يطلع من هذا المخيم لبرا لحتى هو يقدر يشوف ويقدر يقرر هو شو بده يعمل، ما بعدين ينصدم برا شو فيه يعني. بالنهايه اذا انا بقدم خدمه لازم انا اشوف يعني بشكل عام شو في حوالي يعني.
Thank you. Thank you, Znara. The next question I will put to everyone, it was in the Q&A, which is, so we've spent a lot of time talking about immediate support or specific programs to be run for refugees to help them launch businesses. But the question was, what is the follow-up necessary to ensure that these businesses can be sustained over time? From our opinion, from what we have seen in Iraq, it's clear that there are longer-term obstacles. It's not just one, thing that you can surpass and then you are good to go. So I would love to open it up to the panelists. What sorts of things are you doing or thinking about that involves longer-term support to refugee-led businesses?
So maybe from my side, it's creating that ecosystem. So I worked quite a bit in fragile environments or post-war environments or environments that are not very developed. And what we actually wanted to work with universities and with the local ecosystem. So creating and facilitating and supporting those ecosystems becomes fundamental because, from our side, from UNITR, from NGOs, international NGOs, as Charlie pointed, sometimes the funding runs out and we won't be there. So you need to, right from the start, look at what is the ecosystem to support entrepreneurs in general, and how do you support them to be able to continue to provide the services in the future. A lot has to do with registration of businesses. A lot has to do with the issues with standardization of products, for instance, or issues regarding approvals to launch different products in the market, getting the health ministry to approve those, these type of things. And if you tap into whomever that in that environment is supporting that, then you'll be supporting in the long run. going back to the previous question, what we need to also actually address is, the return on investment for the refugee businesses. And what I managed to track over 3-4 years is actually the return on investment, is for refugee entrepreneurs is higher than your average, because usually refugees are really motivated, more so perhaps than the host community, because they don't have a safety net to fall back into. So they need to make that succeed. So it becomes an obsession for them to have those businesses succeed. And that's sometimes it's what it takes for entrepreneurs to succeed. That obsessiveness at the beginning to be able to promote those businesses. Back to you.
Thank you, Oscar. Charlie, Anna, Znara, do any of you have comments on this question about longer term support?
Yes, I would like to say that right now, for example, in this program that we have in Impulsa, we don't yet have an impact evaluation in which we could actually say if what we're doing is going to be sustainable over a few years, or if it actually works properly and technically or not. But we do think that that's very necessary. And as I was saying before, we have a lot of agencies who are working with migrants on entrepreneurship, but we don't really know what efforts are actually the ones we should escalate and continue doing or not. So we are trying to find resources to fund impact evaluations for our programs and initiatives to see how we can improve them, or if we have to make some changes and adaptations on them. But going back to your question on long-term support, one of the things that we are really concerned in Colombia is that migrants, for instance, some of them, when they come to Colombia, they don't really have quality jobs, in the sense that they don't have access to health insurance, social security, and so on. And one of the things we don't want to continue to happen is that once they create and start their businesses and they are growing, and then they start to hire more people, we want them to also have these jobs created on a formal and legal framework in which actually they are improving. They had a previous situation which was maybe not the best, but now once they are growing, they can actually change this model and contribute to the quality of life of the population that they are employing as well. So we are really trying to focus a lot on how migrants are agents of change, and they not only had to face a lot of barriers and challenges, but they now can also change the situation of a lot of people through entrepreneurship. And that's one of the things that we're trying to put a lot of attention. We are also trying to measure many different things. For example, if they're actually increasing their sales over a couple of years, and that's one of the indicators that we're trying to see if the sales are actually sustainable or not, if they're standardizing their products, if they're actually having some alliances to see if they can no longer have so many intermediaries to exchange their products or services. But we are really concerned that they actually try to help to reduce inequality in the country. In Colombia, we have a lot of inequality, and we're trying to pay a lot of attention in that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those thoughts. I think that's really interesting. Patricia, my co-founder, just shared a link going off of what Oscar recently said about data found about refugee loan repayment. So just for the attendees, we are coming close to the end of the panel, and I do want to respect everyone's time. And so what I would like to do is go through the 4 panelists, and if you have closing thoughts, advice, follow up for the attendees, it would be great to share just 1 or 2 final lines from everyone. Charlie, you're the first person I see on my screen. Would you like to begin?
I'm very happy to, and thank you for a great discussion. It's been a pleasure hearing from the other panelists on this important topic. I will end with also a sneaky answer to our next 5 years, or what comes next from an exciting standpoint. And that's alongside hopefully solving this access to finance challenge, or finding new solutions for it. We also want to help train other organizations to expand business support for refugee entrepreneurs. And we want to do that in the UK, but also in the US and in Canada. So our whole approach to the sector is, we think it needs to be collaborative. We need to work with other organizations that are willing to work and expand services, business support services for refugee entrepreneurs. And we want to make sure that our training programs, our content, our marketplace, and anything we do around access to finance is usable for other populations in English-speaking refugee diasporas around the world. So that's our first step, and that's what we want to do by 2025. And so, you know, it's an appeal that if anyone is looking to do this work in other parts of the world and would like to collaborate, then please reach out. We would love to keep pushing the agenda forward on how we can best support refugee entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And TERN has such an impressive model. I'm hoping that there are lots of people that will respond to that. I know 51 Labs, we are already in close contact, and so we really appreciate that. Oscar, you're the next person I see on my screen. Would you like to share a few lines to close out?
Yeah, well, what can I say? I think the spaces, and I thank you, Alice, for the invitation. I thank all the panelists for the discussion. I think this is exactly what, you know, the discussion should be. It's, you know, humanitarian business has become that, a business. There's billions of dollars being invested now on humanitarian assistance. I think more needs to be done about regenerating autonomy and regenerating, you know, the self-agency and the autonomy that that refugees need and demand. And I think entrepreneurs provide that kind of shining light, you know, because entrepreneurs in general, they're people that are self-driven, and they're people that are able to make the best out of a war situation, and they were able to overcome challenges. So I see like a parallel between entrepreneurs and refugees in general, because you know, entrepreneurs usually have to, you know, get up after, you know, falling down, and refugees is a bit the same thing. So I see you know, very similar kind of skill sets and attitudes, and then we need to be more, you know, getting not only the good stories, you know, because we have plenty of those. You know, one of the founders of WhatsApp was, you know, a refugee. One of the founders was Google, also came to the US as a refugee or person persecuted back in his country. So we have those feel good stories that made it into general things. But I think that low scale, you know, what Charlie's doing, what also 51 Labs is doing, that slow scale community building, community re-empowering kind of work, you know, peer-to-peer support, entrepreneur to entrepreneur support is so much needed, because this is the social capital that not only the entrepreneurs will need, but in general all the refugees will need to be able to thrive and to be able to live in dignity and full fulfillment of their rights. So congratulations to all of you, to Skoll, to putting this great discussion together, and looking forward to continue to work with you. Over.
Thank you so much, Oscar. Znara, would you like to share a few final words or words of advice?
شكرا حسن، عزبناك معنا اليوم. شكرا أليس على هي الاستضافة. بتمنى أشوف كتير برامج هي عن جد بتخلق نوع من الاندماج بين اللاجئين والمجتمع المحلي، لأنه هذا الشيء كتير رح يساهم بأنه يكون في علاقات نوعا ما، ممكن يكون في عمل مشترك وهو بيحقق الاستدامة أكثر. يعني ثاني نقطة، يا ريت كمان في نقطة إنه بعض البرامج هي بتطلب من اللاجئين أوراق رسمية أحيانا لحضور بعض التدريبات اللي لها علاقة بريادة الأعمال. في بعض العائلات هي الناس طالعة من تحت الحرب، هي مو طالعة نزهة ورح ترجع، يعني فشي طبيعي إنه ما يكون معها جواز، أو ممكن مستمسك قانوني بطريقة معينة. فبتمنى إنه كمان يعني يندرس هذا الموضوع بطريقة صحيحة، لأنه بفتكر ساعتها عم نظلم كتير قدرات هي موجودة وهي قادرة لأنه تساهم وتكون جزء من اقتصاد هذا البلد. شكرا كتير، ونعم بتمنى أشوف أكثر يعني جهات مثل 51 Labs بالمستقبل القريب تقدر تدعم رائدين الأعمال واللاجئين والنازحين. نعم، شكرا.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Znara. And I think that it's a problem around the world. We recently ran a pilot here in the US, and half of the participants came to us and said that they had lost their documentation, and it was challenging for them to be able to register a business. And so, yeah, you bring up a point that I think affects people everywhere. And there need to be, like you said, you are coming from a war zone, so it's really challenging. Thank you for those comments. Anna, do you have any final words for the attendees?
Yes, Alice, I would like to thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to connect with 15 Labs, and I'm sure we have a lot to do here in Colombia. I would also like to thank Charlie, Oscar, and Znara. As I was saying, in Colombia, we have like several challenges. And now I think with migration, one of the big challenges we also have is to change the narrative, because sometimes we perceive that there's still a lot of xenophobia, and that even Colombian citizens are seeing the way we are working with migrants as if we are not paying enough attention to any other challenges that we still face with the population. So we need to learn a lot about how many European countries and US and so on have been working with this to try to integrate the host communities and the Colombians, to see this as an opportunity for everyone. In Impulsa, we have a lot of experience working with entrepreneurs and with the ecosystem, and we also have experience with vulnerable population, but we're just starting to learn from migration. It was the first like initial pilot project, and we have learned a lot, but we would be very happy to continue learning from all of you and from all the experiences that have worked or that have not, to see how we can actually integrate that into the programs that we are currently designing. So I would be very happy to connect, and I will leave my email on the chat.
Alice, you're on mute. Alice, you're still on mute.
Wow, I just said a great ending and none of you heard it. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, I just wanted to say to all of the attendees and to the panelists, thank you all so much for joining us today during the Skoll World Forum Ecosystem Day. I hope you all have a chance to go to other events during the day. Please feel free to reach out to, I'm speaking on behalf of all of the panelists, but feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. This is a conversation we are all really passionate about and would love to continue with you all and with each other. And for the panelists, thank you for taking time out of your busy work and very important work to join us to have this conversation. This video will be shared by 15 Labs on our YouTube and also by the Skoll World Forum afterwards. And so if you didn't have a chance to see the whole thing, it will be available. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend, and Ramadan Kareem to everyone who is celebrating. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.